I think it's from a number of factors that I can attribute it to. Like I said, my father was a medical doctor, and anytime I'd get sick, he would give me antibiotics. I mean, that was a thing to do. So of course we know that has a strong, profound effect on my intestines and the bacterial flora that are in there. I grew up on this standard American diet. I bragged to my friends about drinking a whole liter or maybe 2 liters of soda a day. I had a lot of junk food growing up, and I was pretty active, so I wasn't that overweight. A lot of stress growing up, a lot of family things that were really hard on me that I put right into my stomach. I know that's where I kept all that stress. And it really, not having a purpose, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life when I knew I didn't want to be a medical doctor, I think that added to it. And I got really, really sick, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of pain. And I struggled for a couple years there. The medications that the doctors gave me really didn't do that much. I felt like I had bad reactions to them, and they didn't help me. And I really felt lost. And I asked, Brigitte and I had just married, and she was a big support for me. And we talked about what are the things that we can do to change this. Well, around that time, so it was on my mind that there needs to be profound change to my life, but I didn't know what that entailed. I didn't know what that means. And around that time, we decided to help out her family. Her mom and dad were working on an alm, which is, in fact, this is the alm here. So it's really high up, much higher up than where Brigitte's village was. And this is a different mountain. It's not the same mountain where she lives. But I think because you can, well, it's maybe hard to tell from this picture, but they don't, when we have ranches here where there's cows, people can put the cows out to pasture. Well, up on the mountains, it's really hard to do that. And in the summers, they, over centuries, they brought the cows up high into a higher valley. And they would collect the milk, kind of like a co-op, and give, like they would make butter and cheese out of the milk. And then they would give the dairy products back to the farmers based on how much milk their cows produced. So Brigitte's father offered to help out that summer, and him and my mother-in-law were up there, and they needed some help. So we offered. We went up there for probably 2 to 3 weeks, and it was my first time being on an alm, and probably like my first time really spending that amount of time, up there in nature. And I really had an amazing healing experience up there. So I'm gonna show you. This is I made a video and I pasted it, or I posted it on my website. So I'm just gonna have it running in the background while you continue discussing this journey that I was on. So up there on the mountain, breathing the fresh air, going for hikes, but also eating, really changing my diet. I only had mountain spring water. I didn't drink any soda. There's no junk food up there. Brigitte's mom, she did make some bread, but it was spelt flour. Ate a lot of vegetables. I mean, it was real simple, and ate a lot of dairy. And the dairy was from cows that are eating the grass up there. So anybody who knows about grass-fed dairy, we all kind of learning how important that is now if you're going to eat dairy, because they get a lot of rain up there, so you can see how lush it is. And anytime the grass is growing and the cows are eating it, it's very high in beta carotene, which goes on to support vitamin K2 production and other fat-soluble vitamins. So I was getting a lot of nourishment that my body needed. But it was profound for me to, like Brigitte's brother, Carl Josef, was up there, and he would take me up, and I would drive the cows up further into the fields. And it's quite amazing. That cows can climb mountains. I didn't know that. But it was a really amazing experience for me. I never really camped. Didn't spend a lot of time in nature like that. So one day I felt called to go for a hike and to go up the mountain by myself. I'd been on this trail before with Carl Joseph, but this was my first time I ventured by myself. While hiking up the mountain alone, my senses became alive. The nature was so intense. I felt the sun warming my arms. The colors were brighter. My eyes were drawn to every passing bush and boulder. I smelled the sweetness of the forest. I tasted the dry dirt kicked up by my boots. The sounds, the chatter of the birds, the crackle and babble of the stream. My mind was quiet. Few thoughts, but the realization that I no longer felt sick. I wasn't sick. I had forgotten what health felt like. I remembered living. I'd been drinking water from a crisp, clean mountain stream, been breathing fresh, unpolluted mountain air, and had been eating simple, unadulterated, and very nourishing food. I walked further up the trail. I took time to gaze upon the blue sky and distant mountains. I walked amongst the most beautiful magenta mountain roses, and cupping my hands, I drank from a tumbling stream. The water was just so alive and vital with energy. And I sensed it knew a secret, something that it had been waiting on for eternity to let me in on. I climbed still further up the now narrowing path. I felt compelled to stop. I gazed out to the mountain peak across the valley, and I was moved to tears with emotion. It was here, amongst the evergreens, the bluebirds, the marmots, and in this particular spot on this very large earth, in this place in which my heart recognized as home, that I heard it. It was my calling, and it spoke to me with all my senses. It was my voice deep inside my chest, and it was my voice inside my head, and it was also the voice of the mountains and the trees in front of me. It was strong and it was powerful, and it said matter-of-factly, this is me. This is how I need to live my life. I want to live in tune with nature. I want to help people, everyone, not just the sick, to learn how to live healthy. I want to learn this, and I want to teach this. And so that's what I felt, and that's what I wrote down when I got off that mountain, when I got home. But this was such a profound experience for me. It really changed the direction of my life. I stopped being sick. I stopped having pain. I stopped vomiting. I stopped having diarrhea. Just from being up on that mountain. I didn't take any medications, didn't take any vitamins, I didn't take any supplements. I was up there in an environment that was so vibrant and so alive. And it changed me. And I had vowed from that day forward that this is something I want to do. It's something I want to teach, and something I want to immerse myself in. So I went on to naturopathic medical school in Portland, Oregon, and then I went on to study Chinese medicine. As I could get closer to, the Chinese have been studying the energy patterns of nature for thousands of years. And so I felt the calling to learn that technique and to study that and to assimilate that into how I practice. And so I've been practicing for, getting close to 20 years now, seeing patients. And I have not had the chance to teach these skills before. I've taught Qigong, but it's something that I'm really excited to with our move into our new office space and being right next to Tubbs Hill to immerse into nature and to bring patients into nature in a special, focused way. And so those are my goals now with the clinic, and I'm very excited to be teaching this lecture now and going into the details. So we're gonna talk about how nature and how that helped to heal me and how it can help to heal others. What's the science behind it? So using the example, because we know that nature can heal in a lot of different ways, but we're talking about in the pandemic that we're in right now, it's important to understand how that affects our immune system and then how it relates to the COVID infection right now. So we know that there are increased risks for severe COVID-19 infection. And so I'm sure everybody here knows this. If you're older than 65, if you live in a nursing home or a long-term care facility, and then people of any age with underlying medical conditions, especially if it's uncontrolled. So the ones that we hear a lot about is COPD, moderate to severe asthma, so lung disease. We know if you're obese or if you have high diabetes or high blood pressure, the combination we'll call metabolic syndrome. If you have chronic heart, kidney, or liver disease. And then if your immune function is low. So what do all these things have in common? The inflammation and the neuroendocrine system, including neurotransmitters and cytokines and inflammatory molecules that are intertwined in our system. So here's an article. We're going to look at some articles throughout this to kind of show that this is all in published research. So this one's called Nature. It's called COVID-19 and the Role of Chronic Inflammation in Patients with Obesity. And this was published in May this year. So chronic inflammation, which accompanies obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, leads to abnormal innate immune response in these patients with an altered first line of defense. They have increased inflammatory responses and abnormal T cell responses, making them more vulnerable to infection and severe disease. The inflammatory marker IL-6, that stands for interleukin 6. I'm going to talk more about interleukin 6 through this presentation. But interleukin 6 is already high in this population. And it has a very pro-inflammatory role. And it's very important in the pathogenesis of patients with acute respiratory distress syndrome, right? When you get COVID and things progress, eventually, if you're going to have real serious infection, you're going to get acute respiratory distress syndrome. It's really going to affect your lungs. So what they found is in the plasma, in the blood, and in the lung tissue, there's very high levels of IL-6. And what they also find is that IL-6 is intricately involved in inflammation that affects the liver and other organs of the body. So another thing about IL-6 is that as we age, it really increases. In fact, they have a term for this called Inflam Aging. And it's basically chronic low-grade inflammation that develops with advanced age. So this is another article, a different one from May, called COVID-19 and the Role of Chronic Inflammation in Patients with Obesity. Oh no, it's the same article. The COVID-19 pandemic is a stern reminder not to take our immune system for granted. The fact that some individuals contract and clear the COVID virus without apparent symptoms stands in sharp contrast to the damage that this virus has brought upon more vulnerable populations, including the elderly and patients with chronic conditions or cancer. While the differences in severity of infection between these populations are multifactorial, it is likely that innate immunity provides the underpinning, given its central role in early response to viral infections. So that's a quote from this article. Innate immune system is essential. So within 2 decades, there have been 3 known coronaviruses, zoonoses, the SARS-CoV-1, the MERS, and SARS-CoV-2, all of which have taken a devastating toll on the human and economic health of affected societies. Unfortunately, with the frequency and diffusion of novel zoonoses, this is unlikely to be our last battle. As we begin the long and daunting recovery from this pandemic, we must take the opportunity to think about how to exploit our innate immune system to better prepare us to fight this and the next virus. So this article in May is realizing that we can't just rely on a vaccine, that we have to make sure our immune system is working right. And that in particular, that our innate immune system is working right. So there's a difference between innate and adaptive immunity. So adaptive immunity is what makes when we get the antibody response, which is what they do with the vaccine. But what we're learning is the innate immunity is really critical and important here. So I'm going to share some slides because I really want to explain this to you because I think it's really important moving forward to understand how the immune system works. So I'm using some slides from Harvard Medical School to illustrate this. First, let's watch a little video that they put out about how the immune system works.
There's a world all around us that we can't see because it's largely below the resolution of our eyes. This is the microbial world, which is amazingly diverse. It includes bacteria and viruses and fungi, and there are actually millions of species of all these types of organisms. We live in peace with most of them, but every now and then we breathe or eat or touch one of these microorganisms that is actually disease-causing or a pathogen. The subway that many of us take to work in the morning is a hotbed of microbial life. One sick person's sneeze can release aerosolized pathogens into the air. The viruses in those droplets are small enough to be inhaled by anyone in their path. These droplets basically sort of fall apart, and these viruses bind to the surface of these cells and get brought in or taken inside the respiratory lining cells. And viruses have clever ways of using our own cells' machinery to help replicate themselves. The cells that are infected will make many, many copies of the initial virus that went in, and each one of these then can be another infectious viral particle. The presence of the virus in these cells and maybe even the replication of some of these viruses alarms or wakes up the immune system to do more. The immune system's battle against an invading pathogen may be waged locally and produce all the symptoms that we normally associate with a cold, such as fever, sneezing, sore throat, and chills. The unlucky recipient who was in the pathway of the sneeze will actually suffer while the immune system combats the invading pathogen. Our bloodstream, our circulatory system, has blood moving all over our body, and one of the roles of the circulation is to bring immune defense soldiers, cells that we call white blood cells, to the site where the infection is. And some of these white blood cells are very good at eating microbes. Some of them are called macrophage, which means big eater. Others are called neutrophils, which are another type of cell that eats microbes. If the pathogen, if the virus is evolved to be really more dangerous than a lot of most common microbes, the immune system, as we described it so far, is not enough to control it. And so the virus continues to survive, and there has to be a larger battle or better weapons thrown at it. Those take a little while to develop, that involve molecules that we will talk about later called antibodies and specific types of cells called lymphocytes. They may take many days up to a week to get revved up and to be effective. So even after we successfully battle an infection, we're going to be confronted again and again with other microbes and other microbial pathogens. So it's an interesting question about how we constantly can mount immune responses, then return back to normal, and how we can mount many diverse types of responses against many diverse types of organisms. The science of immunology tries to tackle these questions and to understand how we can actually help manipulate the immune system to better fare against the microbial world.
So now we're going to kind of elaborate on that, go a little bit deeper, because I want you to understand some of these concepts in immunology and how it's going to be relevant when we talk about how nature and nature immersion will bolster our immune system. So innate immunity is our body's first line of defense against invasion of pathogens. The innate immune system it's always ready to react, it's broadly specific, and it's consistent. So what does it mean, always ready to react? It provides the first response to injury and assault by pathogens. It recognizes common patterns associated with many pathogens or types of injury rather than specific pathogens. And it reacts in the same way to repeated exposure to a particular threat. So it's primed and ready to go. It's the first line of defense. Mucus at mucosal barriers, keratin on the skin, tight junctions between epithelial cells, And antimicrobial chemicals made by epithelial cells are all barriers, physical barriers, and they also chemically prevent pathogens and commensal organisms from entering the body. So just as we put signs on the door saying don't come in if you're sick, or we spray things down, try to kill the virus before it comes into our buildings, wash our hands, right? Our body does that. So it uses chemicals and it uses a physical barrier to try to protect us from pathogens, including viruses. The key cells in innate immunity include several types of circulating white blood cells. And they reside in the tissue. So there's the mast cell, the dendritic cell, macrophages, monocytes and neutrophils are in the blood and they come out of the blood. But they're immune, the cells have immune receptors to recognize pathogens. The innate immune receptors on these cells are able to bind to a wide variety of threats. They recognize common structures called pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs. Many PAMPs are molecular motifs commonly found on the outside of large classes of bacteria. These are often seen as lipopolysaccharides, or on gram-positive bacteria, they're called peptidoglycans. On viruses, what they're recognizing, these PAMPs are DNA and RNA from the viruses, and they're detected by the cells that ingest them. So after recognizing a pathogen, the innate immune system cells perform several functions. Some of the cells will ingest and kill the pathogens. So we see that with the macrophages and the neutrophils. The dendritic cells will ingest the virus or the bacteria, the pathogen, and then they'll present a part of that to other cells and help signal the adaptive immune response. Mast cells release large amounts of cytokines and other pro-inflammatory mediators, so like histamine, right? That's when we have an allergic reaction. And then most of these cells will also secrete molecules called cytokines that act on blood vessels to enhance recruitment of more inflammatory cells and molecules from the blood. So they'll alert, there's a problem, come, we need more help. Natural killer cells I'm going to talk a lot about. The natural killer cells detect and kill stressed or virally infected host cells by releasing pro-apoptotic molecules, meaning they kill the cells. So rather than actually going after the viruses or the bacteria directly, they see an infected cell and they go after the cell and destroy it, because that cell is replicating more viruses to pump up into the system. That's what viruses do, right? They replicate, they grow, and we get more and more. So natural killer cells, they release some components called perforin and granzymes that are really important to help kill the cell. Cytokines, chemokines, histamine, and other pro-inflammatory mediators send signals to other innate immune cells and the cells of surrounding tissue. And it allows proteins from the blood to enter the tissue and interact directly with pathogens. These are called complement proteins. And complement proteins become activated on microbial surfaces, enhancing their phagocytosis or leading to lysis. So they're proteins that help to kill these microbes. So to understand how this all works together, we're going to kind of go through an example. Sentinel cells of the innate immune system that are always present in the tissue, they're the first to recognize and to respond to an invading pathogen. These are the first responders. And these do include the mast cells, the dendritic cells, and macrophages that are already residing in the tissue. When these cells recognize the PAMPs that we talked about earlier, they release pro-inflammatory mediators. So you see like all those little squares and circles and triangles, those are the cytokines asking for more innate cells to come. They also stimulate the blood vessels to become leaky. So looser connections between endothelial cells allow movement of fluid and molecules into the tissue. So we also see that in the gut, and that's part of what happens with leaky gut. Circulating complement proteins move from the blood into the affected tissue and bind to and kill pathogens. Cytokines also stimulate blood vessels to attract circulating immune cells. So neutrophils and monocytes that are in the blood vessels will go through the walls of the vessels and enter that area where the infection is. So that's a picture of a monocyte going into the area and becoming a neutrophil. And the neutrophils will detect, ingest, and kill the pathogens. Monocytes, this is a picture of monocyte becoming a macrophage and killing the pathogens. As pathogens and dead cells are cleared by macrophages, homeostasis is restored. Additionally, then, dendritic cells ingest those proteins made by the pathogens at the site of infection, and they process them into peptides that are proteins that are displayed on the cell surface. These dendritic cells, so they present them on the surface, and then they go into the vessels to alert other cells. And these have something called major histocompatibility compatibility molecules, MHCs, that are important for communication to other cells. But that's a picture of a lymph node. And so inside the lymph nodes, they stimulate T cells and the adaptive immune system, which is all the antibody production. But I want to focus more on the innate immune system, the role of the natural killer cells. So again, this is a slide that shows the natural killer cell releasing perforin and granzymes and killing the virally infected cell. On the virally infected cells, or on all cells, they have the MHCs there. And if they're all present and have good connections with the natural killer cells, it inhibits the killer cell from killing that cell. If there's not a lot of the MHCs, if they're not on the cell, then there's binding between the NK cell and what are called activating ligands, so what it connects to on the infected cell. And then that will have some activation. But you get strong activation when, you can even have strong activation when there's still some of the MHC1, but there's a lot of the receptors, the other receptors, the activating ligand receptors. So NK cells provide rapid responses to virus-infected cells, acting on around 3 days after infection. And they also respond to tumor formation, so for cancer. Typically, immune cells detect a major histocompatibility complex presented on infected cell surfaces, triggering cytokine release, causing the death of the infected cell by lysis or apoptosis. NK cells are unique, however, as they have the ability to recognize and kill stress cells in the absence of antibodies, allowing for a much faster immune reaction. They were named natural killers because of the initial notion that they do not require activation to kill cells that are missing the self marker, the MHC class 1. This role is especially important because harmful cells that are missing the MHC1 markers cannot be detected and destroyed by other immune cells, such as T lymphocytes. This is just illustrating two kind of roles here of the NK cell becoming activated. So you have the K cell, and then you have them getting stimulated, becoming activated, and then doing two things, killing an infected cell, and then also releasing more cytokines to bring on the adaptive immune response. So it triggers that later phase, which can take up to a week later. So in this article, it was published in June, end of June. So we hear about flattening the COVID-19 curve. Well, here they're talking about doing that with natural killer cell-based immunotherapies. So they're talking about coming up, in the biotech industry, whether it's pharmaceuticals or other ways, right, of increasing your natural killer cells as a way to flatten the curve, as a way to protect our population. And a quote from this article: SARS-CoV-2 infection is associated with reduced NK cell levels and exhausted phenotype, which may impede viral clearance in addition to severe lung damage. So they're saying if you have reduced NK cell levels, it's going to lead, you're not going to clear the virus and you're going to get really sick. And that's what we're seeing with severe infections. There's a dual role of NK cell activity, especially when it relates to coronavirus. So it's really important in the initial part for protecting and stimulating the immune system and stopping the infection from going bonkers. If you don't have enough NK cells or they're not working correctly, then that increases the chance then of more cytokines and more inflammation, and it creates this vicious cycle, and then the NK cells are actually implicated at that point in the later stages of disease of causing so much inflammation and leading to acute respiratory distress and organ damage and all the problems that we see with severe infection. So if we can go into the beginning, and this article is talking about finding, pharmaceutical ways of stimulating NK cell function to prevent the severe disease that we're seeing. So Dr. Murray's a naturopathic doctor. He recently gave a webinar that I watched, and I like how he worded this. He called it the infection equation. In the infection equation, the interaction of the host immune system with the infecting organism determines the equation's outcome. So if you have a weak immune system and you have a highly infectious virus, which is the case with COVID-19, you're going to get severe disease. If you have a strong immune system with a highly infectious virus, you're going to get a less severe or no disease. And it's kind of intuitive, but it's an important thing to think about. So he goes on to talk about key nutrients that are really important for immune function. You may have heard of some of these, and I'm recommending a number of these to help bolster the immune system. So it includes vitamin A, which has a significant antiviral effect. It also helps with the barrier function. Beta-carotene and other carotenoids to support the thymus function. Vitamin D is really, really important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Vitamin C is critical also for optimal immune function. B vitamins, especially B1, B6, B12. This helps with antibody production. Zinc, he calls the gatekeeper of immunity with direct antiviral activity. And then selenium, which he says is essential for thymus and cell-mediated immunity. I'm sure he's talked about this, but he didn't include this in his 7 key. But I find quercetin really important, N-acetylcysteine, melatonin. And then let's not forget about key herbs like elderberry, andrographis, cat's claw. Chinese herbal formulas have been really well researched in this field. And then intravenous vitamin C therapy, which they've been using a front line to help combat the severe infections. So I'm not going to focus on the nutrients and the herbs today. We're going to focus on nature. So immersing yourself in nature has a profound effect on your health. It helps your immune system, helps your cardiovascular system, helps your lungs, your respiratory system. It helps with stress reduction, helps with emotional health, helps with mental function. So all these things that are really important during this pandemic can be aided by getting out and interacting in a profound way with nature. So raise your hand if you've heard of Shinrin-yoku. Okay. So Shinrin-yoku is a traditional Japanese practice of immersing oneself in nature by mindfully using all 5 senses. It literally translates as force bathing. I like to use the term nature immersion or nature therapy. A Shinrin-yoku trip in Japan involves visiting a forest for relaxation and recreation while breathing in volatile substances called phytonicides, natural chemical components found in the essential oils of the forest trees. Alpha pinene and limonene are 2 examples of the antimicrobial volatile organic compounds derived from trees. In Japan, Incorporating forest bathing trips into a good lifestyle was first proposed in 1982 by the Forest Agency of Japan. Research conducted in Japan and China points to a host of positive health benefits for the human psychological and physiological systems associated with the practice of nature immersion. During the 1980s, Shinrin-yoku surfaced in Japan as a pivotal part of preventing health care and healing in Japanese medicine. The reported research findings associated with the healing components of Shinrin-yoku specifically hones in on the therapeutic effects on the immune system function, for example, increasing in natural killer cells and natural killer cell activity, cancer prevention, cardiovascular system through helping with high blood pressure and coronary artery disease, the respiratory system, including allergies and other respiratory disease, depression and anxiety, mood disorders, stress, mental relaxation, including ADHD, and then human feelings of awe increased. They found that human feelings of awe increase in gratitude and selflessness when you're in nature. Dr. Ching Li is one of the most important early pioneers in researching Shinrin-yoku. In his recent beautiful book entitled Forest Bathing, How Trees Can Help You Find Health and Happiness, he reviews the history, research, and importance of Shinrin-yoku. He states, "We all know how good being in nature can make us feel. We have known it for millennia. The sounds of the forest, the scent of trees, the sunlight playing through the leaves, the fresh, clean air, these things give us a sense of comfort. They ease our stress and worry. They help us to relax and to think more clearly. Being in nature can restore our mood, give us back our energy and vitality, refresh and rejuvenate us." Dr. Ching Li said of himself, "Some people study forests, some people study medicine. I study forest medicine to find out all the ways in which walking in the forest can improve our well-being." We are part of the natural world. Our rhythms are the rhythms of nature. As we walk slowly through the forest, seeing, listening, smelling, tasting, and touching, we bring our rhythms into step with nature. Shinrin-yoku is like a bridge. By opening our senses, it bridges the gap between us and the natural world. And when we are in harmony with the natural world, we can begin to heal. Our nervous system can reset itself. Our bodies and minds can go back to how they ought to be. No longer out of kilter with nature, but once again in tune with it. We are refreshed and we are restored. We may not travel very far on our forest walk, but in connecting us with nature, Shinrin-yoku takes us all the way home to our true selves. The concept that humans have a biological need to connect with nature has been called biophilia, from the Greek meaning love of life and the living world. The concept was made popular by the American biologist E.O. Wilson in 1984. He believed that because we evolved in nature, we have a biological need to connect with it. We love nature because we learned to love the things that helped us to survive. We feel comfortable in nature because that is where we have lived for most of our life on Earth. We are genetically determined to love the natural world. It is in our DNA. And this affinity for the natural world is fundamental to our health. Contact with nature is as vital to our well-being as regular exercise and a healthy diet. Our existence depends on this propensity. Our spirit is woven from it. Hope rises on its current wrote Wilson. We are hardwired to affiliate with the natural world. And just as our health improves when we are in it, so our health suffers when we are divorced from it. In his book, The Biophilia Effect, a scientific spiritual exploration of the healing bond between humans and nature, Clemens Arve describes the forest as a more than human landscape. He says, let's look at the forest for a moment in a different way. Let's see it as a large, highly complex habitat in which thousands upon thousands of living beings communicate with each other. The tree crowns are radio stations that broadcast plant messages through the air. The leaves of shrubs, bushes, vines, and herbaceous plants transmit plant vocabulary, which is received by other plants and animals. In the ground, roots release substances that also contain messages and make a clicking noise that the human ear cannot hear. Plants detect these sounds as physical subterranean vibrations. The forest, just like any other natural habitat, is a place of lively discussion and is dense with communication. Whizzing around everywhere, molecules contain information that other living creatures decode. Among them are countless terpenes. Now imagine entering this forest, a hot spot of communication, with your alert, attentive, as well as constantly communicating immune system. Your immune system doesn't only communicate with other organs and systems in your body, it also communicates with the outside world. It is a sensory organ that is made to receive information that you are unable to consciously perceive. Some of the responsibilities of your immune system are to recognize, assess, and react to stimuli from the outside world. These stimuli could be viruses, bacteria, and all kinds of other substances. The immune system is therefore your body's invisible antenna as you enter the woods. When you breathe in the woods, you're inhaling a cocktail of bioactive substances that plants release into the forest air. One of these groups of substances is called terpenes. When we walk through the woods, we come into contact with gaseous terpenes of plant communication. We absorb them through the skin, but we absorb them especially through the lungs. The terpenes in the air come from tree leaves and pine needles. They also flow out of tree trunks and the thick bark of some trees. Bushes, shrubs, and herbaceous plants among the understory, along with mushrooms, mosses, and ferns, emit them as well. Even the litter layer made of foliage and the moldy humus layer swarming with life emit terpenes. When I learned this, my impression of the forest changed. Now, when I walk through the woods, I have the feeling I'm diving into an enormous breathing organism that communicates with me. I become a part of it, and we breathe and we communicate together. So in 2010, there's been increasing research, and Dr. Qingli is a big part of the research. And this article came out in 2010. It's titled The Effect of Forest Bathing Trips on Human Immune Function. And this review focuses on the effects of forest bathing trips on human immune function. Beginning in 2005, adult Japanese individuals, both male and female, participated in a series of studies aimed at investigating the effect of forest bathing trips on human immune function. The subjects experienced a 3-day and 2-night trip to the forest areas, and blood and urine were sampled on days 2, the first sampling during each trip, and on day 3, which was the second sampling during each trip. They also sampled on day 7 and days 30 after the trip. So it's 2 days, or 3 days, 2 nights. The numbers of natural killer cells, natural killer activity, granulysin, perforin, granzymes, A and B, expressing lymphocytes in the blood, and the concentration of urinary adrenaline were measured. The same measurements were made before the trips on a normal working day as a control. So the mean values of NK activity and the numbers of NK, granulysin, and perforin. Remember we said how important those two components were in killing an infected cell? They also looked at the granzymes A and B. These were all significantly higher than those of the control days, those when they were in the forest. Whereas the mean values of the concentration of urinary adrenaline of the forest bathing days were significantly lower than that on the control days in both male and female subjects. The increased NK activity lasted for more than 30 days after the trip, suggesting that a forest bathing trip once a month would enable individuals to maintain a higher level of NK activity. In contrast, a visit to the city, a vacation to the city, to tourists did not increase NK activity. And the numbers of NK cells or the levels of intracellular granulysin, perforin, and granzymes A and B did not rise. Again, we see an increase in natural killer cells, an increase in their activity, increased granulysin, perforin, and granzymes, and then the stress hormone, the fight or flight hormone, epinephrine, was lower. And so this is graphed out. So we can see before the trip, this is the base level. Day 1, day 2, we get a rise. It continued to rise to the day 2. Remember, they're only there for 3 days. And then day 7. So after they leave the forest, it does start to drop. But 30 days after, it's still significantly higher than before the trip. And if we look at activity, the natural killer cell activity, how the natural killer cells functioned, which is critical, same thing. They're primed, ready to go, and it stays high for 30 days and beyond. So this is looking at it, this is a trip to the city, like a vacation, so it was still a vacation, but it's flatlined here. See how it goes up and it still stays up. No positive changes, no significant change if you go into the city for a couple days and have a vacation and relax there. We're looking at the granulysin go up. So before day 1, day 2, perforin goes up, granzyme A goes up, granzyme B goes up. This is another article. This was in 2018. Health effects of a forest environment on natural killer cells in humans, an observational pilot study. So here they found that they looked at a forest group and they looked at a city group first. So people who lived in the forest or lived in amongst the forest, not that they lived in and amongst the forest. They had 19.5% was their level of natural killer cells. The urban group was 16.4. So it was a static look. Then they took people from the city and they brought them to the forest for a 5-day trip into the forest. And the natural killer cells more than doubled, increasing by 0.89%. So it went from 0.83 to 1.72. And that sounds like a small amount, but it's a doubling. Natural killer cell function increased by over 50%, increasing from 0.77% to 1.13. They summarized it as, this study suggests that exposure to forest environments might enhance the immune response of NK cells and activating NK cells in humans. So this was a study done in 2015, and they looked at middle-aged hypertensive individuals. So middle-aged, they have high blood pressure, and they went for a 17-minute walk. One group went for a walk in the forest, and one group went for a walk in the city for 17 minutes. And they found, they looked at things such as, this is heart rate variability, which is really important. You want to have heart rate variability, and that's important for cardiovascular disease, emotional response, how your whole body functions. And so in the forest group, it went up, and in the urban group, it actually went down. And then heart rate, interestingly, in the urban group, it went up, and in the forest group, the heart rate went down to, which is a healthy response. And so they concluded that walking in a forest induced physiological and psychological relaxation. Well, we know that, we experienced that, but this is some science to it. This is an article in 2019, Medical Empirical Research on Forest Bathing. This is a review study. And this study focused on the newest evidence of the relationship between forest environmental exposure and human health, and it assessed the health efficacy of forest bathing on the human body. They concluded, after looking at a number of studies, that forest bathing activities may significantly improve people's physical and psychological health. And what they found was that forest bathing, it increased your parasympathetic nerve activity, and it decreased sympathetic nerve activity. So again, this was not like one study that was actively done. They're looking at all these other studies, and then they're scientifically evaluating it. And then they're summarizing it. So the summary is that we have increased parasympathetic and decreased flight and fight response. The physiological effects they found was it improved your cardiovascular function, your hemodynamic indexes, it improved your neuroendocrine system, it improved your metabolism, it improved your immunity, and decreased inflammation or normalized inflammation. It improved your antioxidation, and it improved electrical physiological indexes. Psychologically, it improved your emotional state, it improved attitudes and feelings towards things, it improved physiological and psychological recovery, and it improved your ability to adapt to situations and adapt to stress, and it reduced your level of anxiety and depression. So we talked earlier about interleukin 6. This article was in 2015, titled Inhibition of Natural Killer Cell Cytotoxicity by Interleukin 6, Implications for the Pathogenesis of Macrophage Activation Syndrome. Anyways, I wanted to show this because IL-6 down-modulated the cytotoxic activity of natural killer cells. If you are in a state of chronic inflammation, you have higher levels of IL-6. This is something we can measure for. This is something that I can measure for in my cardiovascular panels that I run in my office. If you have chronic inflammation, this decrease was associated with a reduced perforin and granzyme. So your natural killer cells were not able to do the job as efficiently. We talked about how important that is for your natural killer cells and your innate immune system to function during this pandemic. If you have chronic inflammation, this is a study that shows that it affects the way that your natural killer cells and innate immune system functions. In 2016, the health effect of forest bathing trip on elderly patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, lung disease. The patients were randomly divided into two groups. One group was sent to the forest, and the other was sent to an urban area as control. And then they did a number of different evaluations. In the forest group, we found a significant decrease of perforin and granzyme B expressions, accompanied by decreased levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines and stress hormones. So this is something I want you to think about. So we just said how important it is to have higher levels of granzyme A and granzyme B. That's when your innate immune system is functioning right. When you're presented with a pathogen right then and there. But when you're in a chronic inflammatory state like you are with COPD, you have chronic inflammation. So you have high levels of IL-6. And so actually you have, at that point in the later stages, you have higher inflammation, you have higher cytokines, and the natural killer cells actually play a part in that as well. So in this case, they found that decreased levels of that going into the forest decreased the perforin and decreased the granzymes. It also, though, decreased the inflammation, the inflammatory cytokines like interferon gamma, IL-6, IL-8, IL-B, CRP. These are inflammatory cytokines. They summarized, this is a different one. This is heart failure. So similar thing, heart failure, going into the woods and going into the forest. A decreased level of inflammatory cytokines and improved antioxidant function was observed in the forest group rather than in the city group. Decreased level of inflammatory cytokines, increased antioxidants. These results provided direct evidence that forest bathing has a beneficial effect on congestive heart failure patients, and thus may pave the way for potential development of forest bathing as an effective adjunctive therapy on cardiovascular disorders. This is a study looking at phytonicides, the wood, the components in the essential oils, the terpenes, and its effect on natural killer cell activity. And they found that they weren't going into the woods, they were using basically essential oils. And it significantly increased cytolytic activity in a dose-dependent manner. The more terpenes that you're exposed to the more essential oils, the stronger effect it had on the ability of natural killer cells to kill infected cells. And they saw an additional increase in the perforins, granzyme A, and granulysin that we've been looking at. So we have been discussing how nature immersion, including breathing in the antiviral effects of terpenes, has a profound effect on the immune system by increasing our innate immune system, such as NK cell function and decreasing inflammation. Nature immersion also includes exposing oneself to UV rays of the sun, right? Getting outside and being in the sun. And what's one vitamin that increases when we get sun exposure? So this is a study that showed that talks about vitamin D deficiency and air pollution and how that exacerbates COVID-19. And they talk about how it does it through suppressing antiviral peptide, a type of protein called LL37. And so I think one of the most important nutrients that we can take is vitamin D, because vitamin D deficiency really subjects us to infection, rampant infection that can be uncontrolled. So this is directly read from their abstract. Vitamin D deficiency and insufficiency are widely recognized as risk factors for respiratory tract infections. Vitamin D influences expression of many genes with well-established relevance to airway infections and relevant to immune system function. Recently, vitamin D deficiency has been shown to be a risk factor for acquisition and severity of COVID-19. Thus, treating vitamin D deficiency presents a safe and inexpensive opportunity for decreasing the severity of the disease. Vitamin D deficiency is common in those over 60 years of age. Many with comorbid conditions. It's also very prevalent with people with skin pigmentation, sufficient enough to reduce synthesis of vitamin D. The more color you have in your skin, the harder it is for the UV light to penetrate and to activate your vitamin D. What they also found is exposure to fine particulate air pollution. So air pollution is also associated with worse outcomes from COVID-19. When you live in a city, and you're not exposed to nature, you're not getting your vitamin D, and you're breathing in air pollution. Vitamin D stimulates transcription of cathelicidin, which is cleaved to generate the protein LL37. LL37 is an innate antimicrobial with demonstrated activity against a wide range of microbes, including envelope viruses like COVID-19. LL37 also modulates cytokine signaling at the site of infections. Fine particles in the air pollution can interfere with LL37, its ability to destroy viruses, and it may reduce effective immune signaling modulation by LL37. While vitamin D influences transcription of many immune-related genes, the weakened antimicrobial response of those with vitamin D deficiency against COVID-19 may be in part due to reduced LL37. Vitamin D deficiency is an acknowledged public health threat that warrants population-wide action to reduce COVID-19 morbidity and mortality. While vitamin D influences transcription of many immune-related genes, the weakened antimicrobial response of those with vitamin D deficiency against COVID-19 may be in part due to reduced LL37. Action is needed to address COVID-19 associated risks of air pollution from industry, transportation, domestic sources, and from primary and secondhand tobacco smoke. So here we see an interaction between vitamin D and air pollution and its effect on the innate immune system. So we didn't go into how LL37 works, but there are a lot of other mechanisms that vitamin D is important for helping us and helping our innate immune system. And if we're not getting vitamin C, and it's vitamin D, and if we're living at the northern latitude, which we live here, it's very difficult to get your vitamin D levels up to numbers where they need to be. So it's a good idea. It's important to go outside and get sun during midday. You don't want to burn, but you want to get your vitamin D levels up. But in this pandemic, in this situation, it's a good idea to supplement with vitamin D, and I think that's really important. So that kind of concludes the research aspect of science. Now I'd like to do an experimental component of science where we get to run our own experiment and connect with nature using our 5 senses. So we're going to do this through Qigong. I was trained when I was in medical school to do Qigong, and I'm going to incorporate one of the forms that I've taught and kind of modify it a bit so we can experience the beautiful garden here. So Qigong literally means working with the life force and learning how to control the flow and distribution of qi to improve the health and harmony of one's mind and body. The practice involves meditation, subtle movement, visualization, and breathing techniques. We will be integrating the 5 elements phases into a warm-up from Master Wang, the lineage holder of the Jing-Jing-Gong school of Qigong that was taught to me when I was in medical school. So there are 2 things that I want to demonstrate before we actually do the form and practice. It'll take about 10 minutes. Maybe we'll just take a quick break or allow any questions before we do the Qigong. And then we'll go into doing Qigong. Does anybody have any questions from the materials that I discussed or any other materials? Because once we do the Qigong, you're not gonna want to talk much.
I was wondering with the vitamin D, there's also the vitamin D3. So is the 3 important?
So vitamin D3 is the vitamin D that's in our bodies. Vitamin D2 is we can get that in high amounts. Like the pharmaceutical industry use that because it's not really natural to our body. And so it's generally assumed that vitamin D2 and D3 are the same. But I think there's enough research to show that they're not quite the same, that it's better to take vitamin D3 than D2. And a lot of medical doctors will prescribe like 50,000 units a week, 1 pill a week, and that's only for compliance. You could do 50,000 units a week of vitamin D3 as well, but I think it's more natural to do it like on a daily basis to kind of mimic like going out into nature, going out into the sun and getting it that way. But it's a good idea to get your levels checked, and when the lab result comes back, it'll say you're normal if you're above 30. Anybody who studies vitamin D, knows anything about vitamin D, knows vitamin D is optimal. We want to get it up around 50, 60, 70, 80. The concern is toxicity. So I didn't talk about this that much. Maybe I mentioned vitamin K2, but I think it's really important to take vitamin K2 when you are taking vitamin D. So vitamin K2 prevents toxicity. The way we get vitamin K2 in our diet is through grass-fed meats, grass-fed dairy, from eggs, from chickens who eat grass, and especially when the grass is growing. And so what K2 does is it makes sure that the calcium goes into your bones. So with osteoporosis, and a lot of doctors, you couldn't get a doctor to order vitamin D 10 years ago. It was like pulling teeth. Now we're ordering it, or now they know to recommend it. So they're recommending vitamin D. Whether they're recommending enough or vitamin D3, I don't know. But we're actually starting to see a rise in heart attacks, and especially in women. And this is because they're worried about osteoporosis. They're giving vitamin D without K2. Well, K2 is supposed to be in our diet, and K2 makes sure that the calcium doesn't precipitate in the coronary arteries, that the calcium goes into the bones and not into our soft tissue, like the heart and our joints and arthritis and our kidney stones and these other things. So K2 is really essential, and even if you eat, grass-fed meats and game and that kind of stuff, we still don't get enough. So I think it's a good idea and it's hard to get insurance to pay for vitamin D testing. So it's still really hard to have toxicity from vitamin D. You have to be well over 100, and I've never seen anybody get that high. And I test people. But still, I think it's a good idea if you're taking high amounts of vitamin D that you take it with K2 and that you also get your levels tested. Any other questions?
So, with some of the nature studies that they did there, did they ever compare like hot, cold, when they're out in nature and how that affected?
So
Part of it?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't read a study that does that. So it's important to also know that the studies, most of these studies are being done in Japan and China because they recognize that this is a type of medicine. We're starting to see it rise now, and I'm actually excited. I hope that we can get more done in this country and come up with ideas like that and look at the difference. Now, in particular between like winter and summer, we know that in winter, if it's colder and it's snowing and the trees definitely do not release as much of the terpenes. So you're going to lose some of that effect, but there's other effects of being in nature too that are going to probably have a positive effect. One of the studies that I mentioned was using essential oils, and that's something that we can do in the home, in our workplace, and one of the we use an EPA registered hand sanitizer. We actually brought some here, and that is using a terpene. It's thymol, and it is super antiviral, antibacterial, kills 99.9%. It's been granted FDA approval for use in clinical situations. Thymol, it comes from thyme.
From thyme?
Thyme, yes, it's an extract from thyme.
From my herb.
Yeah. Thyme, rosemary, a lot of the herbs are very high in essential oils and in these terpenes and aromatic
How do you spell
compounds.
terpenes?
T-E-R-P-E-R-I-N-E-S.
And that's essential oils that we breathe when we go through the forest.
Yeah, they're components of the essential oils. They're a part of the essential oil.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so we can make our own mix of essential oils to breathe.
So the question is, can we make our own mixes? Yes, of course. And you can put them, one of the things I didn't talk about this, but why, there's the thought, like, why is the virus less active in the summer? Like, we're supposed to have less infection. We're waiting for the winter.
Yes, right.
So a big part of that is vitamin D, because as we're out, we as just a numbers game, a greater population is out in the sun right now getting having higher vitamin D levels. Now they also talk about humidity playing a role and temperature playing a role, and humidity seems to be important to combat the virus. So getting an air diffuser with like a humidifier, and you can put essential oils in, would make a lot of sense. And in particular, I like using the essential oils from different pines, and they're doing that a lot in Japan, specifically for the immune system. She had her hand up first, and I should try to repeat the question. So I'm sorry. You here? Yes. Mhm.
I have a friend that uses oregano before she goes on airplane trips, and she kind of tries to time it by number of days beforehand and so forth. Do you see that effectiveness of that sort of thing?
So it's the same type of thing. I mean, here you're ingesting the oregano oil, but it's the same type. So the question was oregano oil. She's using it. I think she's using it orally, like swallowing it, and it's has a strong antiviral effect. And so yes, you're not inhaling it. It's not going into your lungs directly, although you can get oregano essential oil and use it that way as well. But here you're getting a concentrated form and taking it orally, and it has a very strong antimicrobial effect. We use it a lot for digestive issues, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, infections in the intestines where it has direct contact. But we know that it's useful for the immune system as well.
I had heard that it was good. It acted like an antibiotic.
Yes, it has an antibiotic. Oregano oils, these, as you saw the research that I'm saying, they have antimicrobial effects. So I was talking about viruses, but we know the natural killer cells work on So there's a direct, like, topical effect. Like when the oil touches a microbe, it can have an antibiotic or antiviral effect. Because when you're spraying down a surface, you're not stimulating the natural killer cells of your surface to kill it. It's directly killing it. But what I was talking about earlier was stimulating your immune system with these essential oils. I'm sorry?
I said, hi, Dr. Toby.
Hi.
I want to make a comment and ask a question. You brought up oregano. Dr. Cass Ingram is known as the golden stock. I don't know if you came across the podcast he does. He has a great one on oregano oil, wild oregano oil. So just search Dr. Cass Ingram and learn about oregano oil from his video. But I have a question because the first thing, that was showing the pine trees, and I know pines emit a lot of terpenes, pine resin is used for a lot of things for healing. But what about the deciduous trees? In the area of deciduous trees?
So my understanding is the deciduous trees do not release as much in general. I'm sure there probably are some, but they're not as much. And yeah, so
So hug a pine tree.
yes, well, and go through the forests and mhm.
Because that's why I went got on Toby's case, because Forest Haven, the area where I grew up, I said, because to me it doesn't matter where you are when you get in touch with nature. What do people do when they're out in the desert?
Well,
And
that's
I
true,
bet
yes.
you,
There's
there
certain
is something when
plants
you're
there that have those terpenes
exactly
that are.
just simply being in touch with nature, putting your hand in the sand,
Mhm.
dust.
But a lot of plants contain terpenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the discussion, that if you can hear it, is about, first of all, oregano oil was, a lot of people really like oregano oil. And we're spending time at Pilgrim's Market and working there. I know a lot of people really like oregano oil. So we sell a lot there. So they wouldn't keep buying it if they didn't find it effective, but I've used it with my patients as well. Then the question was deciduous trees, if they have release, because I talked a lot about the pine essential oils. Do deciduous trees release essential oils? And my answer was, yeah, my understanding is they don't do as much. And then, what about other nature? Like if you're in a desert, what? And so, yes, certainly there's so many other, the terpenes are one aspect. To be honest, I don't know if cactuses release terpenes or not, but they're flowers, so they might. But there's other aspects of being in nature, right? The vitamin D. Like if you go down to, what's the place in Arizona? Sedona, right? They're talking about the energy there. That there's like a natural energy pattern in the geodes and the earth, and so there's earthing. There's ions from the water, waterfalls. There's ions, from being in the forest. So there's a lot of other aspects. So I was focusing on the terpenes, but there are so many other aspects in nature. Maybe things that we haven't discovered. The UV rays and the energy that comes from the sun, and the energy that comes, maybe that's harnessed in the desert. If you're in the desert, I don't know, but certainly there are a lot of other aspects. So these are great questions, and so maybe you guys can all join me in doing more research on this. I'd love for that to happen.
When you're out in nature, it balances you.
Being in nature,
No matter where, but
being in nature balances
what
you.
your talk today was about the terpenes, like how they increase the killer cells
Yep.
to strengthen your immune system.
So Brigitte said that what I was focusing on was how the terpenes, its effect on the immune system, and that's correct. Now, I want to stress this is just one example. There's a lot of other research out there. There's a lot of other biochemical things that are going on. There's a lot of other energetic things that are going on inside your body that help your immune system. So I wanted to give an example. So I wanted to illustrate the connection between chronic inflammation, your immune system, and then how being in nature strengthens your immune system and decreases inflammation. And we know this just being in nature, whether it's the terpenes or not, the positive emotional effect. So getting you out of sympathetic and getting you into parasympathetic. And that's going to have a profound effect on your body.
That's why everybody
with a motorhome, and they all head to the hills and the mountains.
So she was saying that everybody's moving out to here to get into nature and to, yeah. Well, during this time, I think people are getting it. You know, there's a reason to get out of the city and to come out here. Yes.
One of the things that I experience when I'm out in nature too is, you know, you're moving. You've got circulation going on through your body. You're not sedentary that we oftentimes are in our work, you know, and just being in our normal routine, our daily lives, just at home. When you go out into nature, usually you're moving. You're taking larger breaths. You've got more blood circulation going, and all of those things in combination with the terpenes and all the different things, the grounding, the energy that's happening around you. I think all of that just, you know, creates a very balanced, like you were saying, balanced, you know, overall health component.
So yes, right? Of course. Increases circulation, and so what we were talking about was, you know, just being out and moving is so beneficial to your health. And when you're out in nature and you're walking and you're increasing circulation, so that's true. But there's a difference between going for a walk in the city and going for a walk in nature. And so that's what this study was looking at. Now, it was only 17 minutes, right? I mean, we're just looking at 17 minutes. So, I mean, it's not a really complete study, but there's something to be said about nature immersion. So when we talk about like ecotherapy or nature immersion therapy, when they're doing the Shinrin Yoku, that what they're talking about doing is going for a slow walk. You're not covering a lot of distance. You're connecting with nature. So I agree with you that exercising and going for a walk, or you know, getting your heart rate going, that's all very important too.
It's also getting out away from the toxic
Right.
environment.
Getting out of the toxic environment, getting out of the pollutants.
Yeah.
And we saw, you know, one example of how pollution affects your immune system directly by interfering with the way that vitamin D works. And so is it no surprise that we're looking at high severe disease in the South right now in the cities, right? You know, in general, we may have more people with colored skin who are not getting vitamin D. We're also not getting enough vitamin D because in these areas, because I think it's so, like I went to visit my mom in Phoenix and nobody goes outside. This is their winter because they're inside because it's air conditioning, right? And it's too hot to do anything outside. You're not going, you know, and if you're going to go out, you're going to go out late, you're going to go in the morning, you're not going to be out and getting your vitamin D. So I think that they have really high vitamin D levels. And so that's why we're seeing all in the South a problem. Now, it's just a theory. They have, I don't know what I said. Brigitte said I said high, they have low vitamin D levels in the city, not high. Yes?
I have a friend that is really stressing taking in sun through her eyes. And, I think this is going to be becoming a new discovery. Anyway, she, you know, doesn't wear...
Sun gazing. She's looking right at the sun at the first thing in the morning and in the evening.
So she's worried.
Oh, worried about the sun?
No, she's doing it. This practice she has of taking in sun through her eyes, and I don't know if that's safe or not.
I haven't studied that. I have had patients tell me about that. This is a field that, you know, people are doing this now. So first thing in the morning, you know, I guess, I don't know this, but they're saying it's safe to look directly at the sun first thing in the morning, and then, you know, in the evening when it's setting too. And you're getting the energy from the sun. So, you know, one of the old original naturopathic doctors, I forget exactly his name, but his whole thing was about sun. Like he was the sun doctor, right? And everything was related to the sun. So, I mean, of course, there's so many benefits to the radiation. We're supposed to be outside. We're supposed to get that radiation. And we have, you know, I can't believe I didn't use that term in this presentation, but, you know, anybody who has a 10, 11-year-old, you know, they're on the gadgets, and they have, you know, it's so prevalent, the nature deficit disorder. And it's a real thing. I have the book up here. I don't know. Did you guys hear me?
Oh yeah, they turned around and looked.
No. So So that's why I'm really super excited to be bringing on an ecotherapist to work with children, to work with families, to help us, because I mean, you can hear me talk. I struggle to get him off the gadgets, to get him off. It's hard, very hard. And we need to work together as a society to get out in nature. So vitamin N, vitamin nature. We may not know all the reasons why it's helpful, but we know it's helpful. It's in our DNA. And we need to do more to get collectively and to get our children, to get ourselves intricately involved in communing with nature and using our five senses.
Toby, with the sun, what I think with the sun, the daylight, it's very important that you spend every day a certain part outside that you see the sunshine, not necessarily staring in the sun. I don't think that that is really good for your eyes.
So
But I think what it does is, your natural rhythm.
So what Brigitte's saying is that sunlight and being out in daylight, helps with your circadian rhythm. I mean, we know like the blue lights and how that affects our circadian rhythm and affects sleep. The blue lights from the computer, etc. So what she was talking about, that there are a number of people. There's a practice of, I think it's called sun gazing, and I don't know that much about it, so I really can't answer. Yeah, question back here.
There was one thing that was really fascinating to me from the studies we had was that their antioxidant levels increased. So I heard about the taking essential oils, but we're hearing all the time, eat your blueberries, whatever, to increase your antioxidants. So I just want to clarify that the study was saying that the actual antioxidant levels were increasing from them.
Yeah, Sherilyn was pointing out that being, outside in nature increased your antioxidant levels. And she wanted to point that out. So not just eating blueberries and through our diet, but it increased your antioxidants. And that study definitely showed that. So, I think there's so many things that we can learn and that we can study. And, we're really, I think, on the cutting edge of understanding. And we all know this intuitively, right? I mean, that's why everybody's moving out here. That's why we go outside. That's why we go for walks and get fresh air and go into nature, because it makes us feel good. But what I wanted to illustrate, that we can look deeper into this and we can look at the science behind it. There's a science behind it. And so the focus, of me being a naturopathic physician, I help a lot of people without using pharmaceuticals. I mean, that's sort of a goal of why a lot of people come to see me, and to look at the root of the problem and try to fix it, or try to get at the root of the problem. And I felt this. I wrote this day one when I wrote my thesis, close to 20 years ago, that we can use vitamins and we can use key nutrients and nutraceuticals, and I do that a lot in my practice to help people feel better and to have less pain and to have less inflammation, and to support their bodies and to help with all different kinds of disease states. But we can't be we have to do more than push pills too. Even if they're vitamins and even if they're not hurting you. We have to get at a big part of the root of disease. And I learned this firsthand when I was sick with Crohn's disease, and I had a healing experience up in the mountains of Austria, where the only vitamin, I guess I got good nutrition. But the only vitamin I got was vitamin N in nature. Nutrition, these are all important aspects. But what I want to emphasize, and what the purpose of today's lecture is that we're not helpless. There's things that we can do. We're all doing it right now. We're outside and we're in nature. So unless there's a big pressing question, I think it'd be fun to move on to Qigong. Any big pressing questions?
Can I say something real quick? I got into this case because all those people doing this study, it's called forest work. And I said, we need immersion into nature. Because actually it's a very small village, really high up in the mountains. And yes, we were surrounded by evergreens. But also, I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm, and I helped my parents work the land. and we had wildflower meadows where if you sat in it, the terpenes from the flowers, so that land has never been touched. It's the original land that how God created it, and when you sat in it, it just immediately it changed. You felt connecting with that nature and those terpenes in the air. It just took all the worries away. You know, if you had questions that you needed to have answered, you know, just sitting a little while in that flower meadow, the answers came to you. So that's why I didn't like just forest bathing. There are still on this earth really pure places with, and I grew up that way. My mom, you know, naming all of the different flowers and also how they're used medicinally. But it's not just, you know, picking those flowers and drying them and using them in different teas, but also sitting in the wildflower meadows and smelling those terpenes, how healing that was. So I just wanted to share that. You don't just do, yes, you can go forest bathing, but there's also other places where you can get those terpenes. Just wanted to share that.
Okay, you guys ready to move? We've been sitting around a little bit.